Are we?
We are.
Okay, cool,
recording.
cool. All right, cool. Well, this is Andre Koen.
And I'm Brian Jost.
And we are your armchair activists. What time is it? I'm not going to miss my shot. I'm not going to miss my shot.
I don't know.
That's all from that
about.
Hamilton. That's,
okay.
That's that thing from Hamilton.
It
Man, you got to hear. I mean, it is... it is just masterful how they've taken history and actually made it interesting.
Well, yeah, apparently I'm missing out. I'll check it out. I keep hearing amazing things about it.
Yeah, man, it certainly makes history alive. It gives it both a context and some tapestry that you can kind of latch onto, and so it's actually quite groundbreaking. And so if folks are interested, go check it out. And again, with anything, you can find it on YouTube or find it, somewhere on Google or whatnot. But it's always important to pay for that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So a lot has happened in the world since we got together last, huh?
Oh yeah. And before we get into that, let's just remind people, check out the website, armchairactivistpodcast.com. We've been building up resources there, and we also have a new link, a page to an Amazon store. So we're an Amazon affiliate. So any of your routine shopping that you do at Amazon, if you go to our site and link up to Amazon there, then we're going to get just a small referral fee or payment. So that is one way you could help support this podcast. It's not going to be much, but we also have a few recommended books there on that link. So you see that on the main menus. And then subscribe in iTunes, and just really appreciate everybody listening and sharing this podcast. Yeah.
I think these conversations have been really helpful for me, as well as I think other folks. So,
they've been helpful for me too, but also stressful.
Yeah. No, this stuff is heavy. This is some heavy stuff.
Like, even right at this moment, I'm kind of just feeling like I don't even want to talk.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because our last show was just before the election. And then, I think right after the election, it was actually kind of hard to get some folks. So I'm glad we had some space to have conversations with folks, and we can come to this.
Everybody was a little distracted.
Yeah, on both sides, right? So the folks that thought that the pantsuit nation would prevail were taken back, and then those who were the trumpeteers really were also shocked in many ways that the pundits were wrong. So one of the things I do know is that we don't know the future.
Right. That's interesting, because I feel like I know it. I feel like it feels like it's going to be a horrible future right now.
Yeah, no.
And it feels like I know it.
So here's the great thing about the future, right? So Alfred Adler, in many of his kind of, he's a psychologist like Freud. He was one of those guys in Vienna that was hanging out. He says things are like this, and they can also be different. Adlerian psychology, right? So they're like this, but they can also be different, which gives us the opportunity to really rise up and demonstrate who we are in the face of adversity. And it's not until we see adversity that we actually get to find out who we are, what we're made of, right? And so I think right now the country is really wrestling with these old ideas of who we were with these new ideas of who we are, and really trying to wrestle with those. And the rise of, like neo-Nazis or white supremacists should not be a surprise to anybody. And to be quite honest, for people of color, I don't know that the alarm was set off by these current events. I think there's been this kind of hyper awareness for a long time. I think for white people, they've been surprised, like, oh my God.
That's interesting. Right. And I keep thinking about how the country or the world didn't just change as of the election. Like, it's just brought to light how it has been for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find I'm exhausted on it. That's all. It's all my wife and I have been able to talk about.
Yep.
And I'm just feeling drained.
Yeah. No. Don't let it drain you. Don't let that happen, because what will happen, particularly for people who don't have to deal with this on a regular basis, but now I think we all have to, is that tiredness we can say to ourselves, I'm tired of this, so I don't want to do it, so I will back away from it, as opposed to leaning into it. Right. I mean, it's it's just like any kind of training. Right.
Well,
so
yeah. And there's people in my life who aren't paying attention to any of it and are aware enough to know that I think that they probably know they should be paying attention, but just are choosing not to.
Yep. So we're now kind of in this idea of this Trump nation, right? So we had to figure out how to engage folks. So one of the things I thought was really interesting when I looked at the election results, particularly here in Minnesota, there was a very clear demarcation between the urban areas and the rural areas. And I think a lot of pundits got it wrong. They thought it was a Democratic leaning versus a Republican leaning. And that's not how I've seen that play out in Minnesota. What I saw in those numbers is that the urban areas, particularly given the 7-county metro, Duluth and Rochester, consider themselves to be pretty advanced and innovative and forward thinking, but they have not listened to their brothers and sisters in rural areas. And so by not listening, we lost an opportunity to actually advance in some conversation that could be helpful. And so those election results, I don't think were necessarily just about Republican or Democrat, but really about rural areas saying we're not being listened to. So here's our opportunity to be listened to. And we found a candidate that says that they will listen to us. I also believe, just like the folks who voted for Barack Hussein Obama, they will also be surprised at the limiting powers that the president oftentimes has. And so all those promises that they thought would happen may not necessarily, given the nature of the position, happen the way that they thought that they would. Like the repealing of Obamacare. I saw Paul Ryan is talking about an Obamacare light kind of situation, right? So, all of these transformative things that were promised in the campaign, much like what Barack Hussein Obama was presenting, may not necessarily come to fruition the way people think that it could or should.
And until enough time passes to see what actually happens, what do you tell people who feel like they don't like the way the direction the government may be going, but feel powerless? And if I don't like who my new president is, and I feel, what?
So here's the thing, right? You can't, and this is what's frustrating to me. You can't split it, but you can't have it both ways, right? So you can't have a democracy that you're free to participate in, and then when it doesn't go the way that you want it, then be totally upset when you believed in this democracy when it was going the other way, right?
But how can I not be upset at people who I think aren't paying attention to the world and then cast a vote anyway?
So here's the secret to that. Use the democratic process. If we are upset, so I was talking with some protesters about why they were protesting, and they were like, "We got to let them know." I said, "Wait a minute, we had the opportunity to let them know in the polls, right? So people didn't show up. 50% of eligible voters didn't vote, right? And then we had a third party candidate that drew away 15% of the voters who did vote, right? So that margin between the two winning candidates was relatively thin. So for me, I can't be upset about that. What I can do is I can contact the people that I elected and say, this is what I want you to think about. This is what I want you to do. For example, I have some officer friends, chiefs who sent some folks over to Standing Rock, right? So I asked them some questions as to why they were doing that, right? Not condemning them, not blah, 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 but I used a little bit of influence I had to make an impact there. And so, getting chiefs to think about that, getting our representatives to think about what we want to do is a way. Now, I am not going to stop telling protesters how to stop protesting. I'm not one of those cats, right? I subscribe to a website called youdoyouboo.com, right? Youdoyouboo.com. It's a joke. That was a joke, right? No, you got to do what you got to do. But there's a difference between being right and being effective. And what I'm finding, particularly in my old age, is that I'm trying to be more effective in what I do. And so, looking at the democratic process, if I believe in this democracy, then I have to fight for that democracy. And I also have to use a number of the tools, not just one tool, but a number of tools to get the ends. Here's something very interesting. When people are watched, they act differently.
Oh, yeah. Right?
So one of the things that I think, what we need to do is have protests in board meetings. And when I say protests, I mean having watchers, people who say, I'm watching you. I'm going to hold you to everything that you talked about. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, then, we're coming with letters, we're coming with bodies, we're going to show up, but we need people to watch folks. Right. And every council, and it's so funny, every board meeting, every council meeting, city council meeting or board of commissioners has that one bothersome community member who is at all the meetings, always has something to say about everything. It's funny, in Anoka County, there's a woman, and I can't recall her name, but she's always asking Anoka County to raise her taxes. Oh. Because she wants the services to continue, right? So she likes the services. She's like, raise my taxes, please. And so there are always those folks. Go ahead.
So are you somebody who's always there, like her? Is she the watcher, or is she acting in that role? Or
yeah, I would certainly say she is a watcher. Right. But we need more of those folks. We need more of those folks to show up where decisions are being made. And so someone said to me, well, Andre, if we start showing up, and I thought that was funny, right? But they said, if we start showing up, won't they just take all their things into executive sessions and blah, blah, blah? And I said, yeah, and that's tipping their hands too, right? So they're saying they don't want transparency. So we need to make these deals in the back. So I encourage citizenry to use multiple ways of protest and engaging with the government that can actually help us yield some results.
I'm brain dead right now.
No, it's all good, man.
I don't think I slept last night.
No.
On a side note.
Yeah, no. We got to get you engaged, man.
Like 2 days ago, maybe I just kind of tuned out.
Yep. That's why cartoons are important. Cartoons are important. At my house, I watch a lot of cartoons. The Justice League and all this stuff. And I have a running joke on my Facebook page that our current situation is the result of one man.
Who's that?
The fastest man alive, Barry Allen. So Barry Allen, the Flash, keeps going back in time to save his mother. And every time he does that, he messes up the timeline. Okay. So we're actually in an alternative reality.
Well, now it's starting to make sense. That's how it's feeling.
But the hardest thing about even kind of dealing with reality is we oftentimes have lots of fantasies about what the world is. And then when confronted with how it actually is, that's when it becomes kind of tough, right?
Well, yeah, kind of tough.
Because,
I've been completely depressed since the election.
Oh, why, man?
I know, I've been messed up.
Yeah. No, just remember, we made this.
Yeah.
So
that's depressing.
It can be depressing, yeah. But the opportunity to remake it also exists,
Mhm.
right? And the other thing is we've gone through these cycles. I mean, consistently we've gone through these cycles, right? It was funny. I also commented, Vice President elect Pence. What's his first name?
Mike.
Mike Pence, right? Had a bad time at the theater, right?
Right. A bad time.
Lincoln really had a bad time at the
Right.
theater, right?
True.
So when you start putting stuff in historical perspective, it's for me, at least it offers hope to say that this is how things were, and then it changed. The problem is we're not learning from history. We keep repeating it,
Right.
and part of that is because of human nature. We're very narcissistic in a lot of ways. In
Yeah.
a lot of ways, So we had the election that came up, and then also a story we've been kind of following and talking about and dealing with here in St. Anthony kind of came to a head, so to speak. And there was the Ramsey County attorney, John
Choi.
Choi.
Yeah, it was last Wednesday.
Did you get a chance to watch it at all?
Yeah, so I watched the announcement on the decision to charge Yanez.
It was weird. So when I watched the same thing, right? So you sent me a message and said, watch this. So I clicked in and I'm watching it. And for me, I was hearing the same kinds of things that they were talking about with Jamar Clark, right? So Jamar Clark earlier, almost 8 months before, was shot by Minneapolis police. And then they had last winter, they had the, how many days was that they were out in the
Wasn't
fourth
it-
precinct?
I don't know.
So the
Was it, you mean the length of the investigation?
no. So when they camped out
Oh,
in
I
front
don't
of the
know.
fourth precinct,
I
it
don't
was
know.
like 18 days or
Okay.
something like that, where they just kind of camped out in front of the fourth precinct in Minneapolis. And so for the sake of transparency, the county attorney for Hennepin County said, I independently am going to make this decision, and I take the weight of that decision. And he decided not to charge the officers in Jamar Clark's death. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to Mr. Choi, and I'm hearing the same rhetoric. And so I'm like, wow, this is just going to be. So at a certain point, I was like,
You thought, because right at the beginning, I can't remember his words, but I thought, whoa, he's going to charge.
yeah, no, I had, for me, it was like one of those juke moves, right? So, let's make them feel like we're going to charge and then not. So I was just like, emotionally, I was just like, really, what's going to happen? I was really surprised. And then because he was given the same kinds of rhetoric, he said, as opposed to going to a grand jury.
Yep.
And here's the funny thing about grand juries. Grand juries are supposed to give a certain level of confidence to the community because it's an independent body making a decision. That's what a grand jury is supposed to be. What has happened in many cases is quite the opposite, that people don't have faith in a grand jury because they feel like the deck is stacked against for the police and against the community. So in both of these cases, Hennepin County and in Ramsey County, the attorney, the county attorney said, "We'll take this on personally," right? Well, that also has a negative and a positive aspect. So, in a number of these ways, it's tough to win, right? I mean, in terms of doing the right thing or being seen as being doing the right thing for the right reasons, because in both cases, these folks are elected officials. So can an elected official do their job efficiently and correctly given the fact that they have to respond to a political environment? And that's an interesting question, right? And so we always have to kind of weigh those thoughts. But when he came out and said that he was going to charge, and that the reason that he was going to charge was based on the fact that fear is not enough And I thought that was very profound because he set a precedence in the state of Minnesota, hopefully in the state of Minnesota, but certainly in Ramsey County, that fear cannot be used as an excuse to take someone's life. And so I thought that was extremely profound because oftentimes that's the story that we hear, right? So I was afraid of fear of my life. So I took a life to prevent mine. And, I have the full sanction of the government to do it, right? Be it the local government, state government, so forth and so on. So I thought that was profound. And then I also thought it was, very interesting as he laid out, and maybe we'll put a link to that announcement in the show notes. But I thought it was very interesting that he also laid out the story of how things happen, particularly from the facts he was able to gather and collect. And although I know that many people may have some feelings about the officer involved, Officer Yanez, and what should or should not happen to him, or where the next steps go. But the thing that really brought me the most relief was to have Philando's name cleared of a lot of the extra things that were being added to him, right? That he was a suspect in this murder, and that he was, and even in the, it's so funny because Mr. Choi lays out, what he believes happened as he goes to charge this officer, and debunks a lot of the extra stuff. But even in the press conference, someone says, well, what about the charges of him in this robbery? And he says, there were no charges in this robbery. He's not connected to anything like that. And so it's funny because people still will want to believe what they choose as opposed to even looking at facts. And so I'm glad that the people who support Philando, who knew him personally, who had interactions with him, could at least get his name cleared. Beyond that, we'll see what happens.
Well, and then tell me what you think, because I had two different African-American men tell me in the last 2-3 days that the charges were a small victory, but that basically black people everywhere think this is a joke, that he's not going to get convicted. And is that your feeling?
Yeah, and to be quite honest, I don't know. I don't know enough about the legal process, and I think getting charged is a huge step that hasn't happened in other places. And so just getting charged, and again, getting this young man. And here's the funny thing. So whatever happens with Yanez, it's not going to bring Philando back.
Right.
So I, as a human being, mourning the loss of another human being, I can't get excited about whatever the outcome is, because it's not going to bring that man back. Right. And so, justice is an interesting.
Oh, and I don't mean excited for a conviction, but hopeful that a conviction should take place. What will it actually?
Yeah, and I don't know. I just know that for my own memory, I would want folks to know the best of who I was, and not talk about, not even talk about, but I don't want lies being told about what I wasn't. You can say what I was, but don't make up lies about what I wasn't. Right. So, and that's on the positive end and the negative end, right? Because when everybody dies, they're the best person on the planet. When in fact we know that's not always true. Not always true. Right. So yeah. So that was, so we had the election. We had we've got Thanksgiving coming up this week.
Oh yeah.
Whoa!
Oh yeah.
Turkey!
Families everywhere excited for this holiday.
Yes.
I think.
It's so funny. We were just talking with Jesse
Poole.
Jesse Poole.
The Bolton newspaper group.
Yeah. So apparently, I guess they're going to do a story on this, on
the podcast,
which is kind of weird, huh?
Right.
Like,
we're newsworthy.
I guess so.
We'll see.
Yeah. So in talking with him, he was talking about like one of his family members they wanted to order an organic turkey and all that kind of stuff.
The finest
of the fine. And so I think that's funny. So I don't know about you, but I've noticed that like free range chickens and free range turkeys are way more expensive than conventional turkeys.
Well, yeah, definitely. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand all the differences between what technically is required to be a free range or organic. You know, I hear about they need the open gate so they can get to the free range. Doesn't
Right.
mean they're on the free range.
Yep. So this is what in my studies, my investigations of the difference between conventional raised.
And are we
poultry.
changing topics to chicken? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. Well, turkey.
Okay.
So the idea that so this is what I know about free range turkeys, right? So they're raised in open pens. They get sunlight. Very few pesticides, very few antibiotics, fewer in number, larger spaces, so forth and so on. And one might even go as far as to say that turkeys are being treated more humanely. Right. So that's the free range chicken. But the conventional turkey, or the free range turkey, the conventionally raised turkey is confined into pens. They're in close proximity to one another. That oftentimes, if not monitored, they will cannibalize each other. So they'll have turkey on turkey crime. There are drugs introduced into that community to keep the turkeys stabilized both mentally and with their health. So and since they're in such close proximity, there's also a lot of dirt and filth in those communities. And one might go as far as to say that those turkeys do not have privilege. And that the free range chickens or the free range turkeys do have privilege.
Right.
But here's the interesting thing about both of those. Whether you pay $50 for your bird, or you pay $14.99 for your bird, or $5 for your bird, whether they were free range or conventionally ranged, that turkey is designed to be served.
Right.
And so sometimes we try to up one person over another, and we try to fight among ourselves about who has what and who doesn't get this or that and the other. And what we don't recognize is that oftentimes it's just a game, and that if you're not paying attention, we all lose. Simultaneously, we can also all win if we're thinking and working together, right? So yeah. So are you ready for your Thanksgiving conversations?
No. No. I expect combative attitudes to be under the same roof and conversations to be avoided.
Yeah, but how? So are you going to be able to avoid them though? That's the
plan.
No,
Just
you can't
avoid
use it
them.
as the plan. Don't avoid that stuff.
No,
man.
yeah, definitely.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you don't know what could happen here.
Okay. Well, I know we're going to some in-laws to be supportive because a very likely situation will occur there as well. So everybody is like on pins and needles.
Right.
And so I'm just going to jump in and be like, I'm gonna just throw it in.
I'm going to tread lightly.
Okay. All right. So, just in thinking about what those conversations might look like for me, right? So I've been mentally preparing myself. So I have like a little flashcard. I've got some flashcards that I've prepared.
Really?
Yes, really.
Like for real?
Like for real, like little cards. I'm like, okay, let me write this down. Because if I don't write it down, man, I might just come off the cuff and then like hurt somebody's feelings or.
What do you have on the cards?
Right. So a couple of things. So one of the things is I've been following one of my mentors. His name is Stevie Ray. He runs a comedy cabaret out in Chanhassen. And he was telling the story about boarding a flight. And so he's boarding a flight, and there's an older white guy, and there's a woman in a hijab that's behind him. And people are kind of shuffling around, and she bumps him. And the older white guy turns around to her and yells at her, "Stop that." and so it's loud enough for everybody to hear, and so the woman like shirks, and and she obviously stops, right? And the man is just red faced and whatnot, and so Stevie walks up to the man and he says, basically, this is his story. Sir, that's not okay to do that. Like, you don't just yell at people like that. And the guy said, well, she was pushing me. And and Stevie said, yeah, even if that, I'm sure she didn't mean it. Right. And so, so this is a white guy talking to another white guy. And so, the guy kind of calms down a little bit as Stevie is talking to him. And he was like, just think about what might be happening for her. In this, because we're all kind of shuffling around, and the guy was like, well, I'm tired of being pushed. And so Stevie said, yeah, I know it's really inconvenient here. So you know what? Let me take your bags. Let me put and so he took his bags and helped him get on the plane and put his bag on top and blah, blah, blah. And so I asked Steve in telling the story, I asked him if he had his safety pin on. And he said, no, I didn't have my safety pin on. I said, you can do all that stuff without having a safety pin.
Right, you can just be a nice person.
You can just be, right? And so when we talk about these conversations at Thanksgiving, a lot of times it's just about being, right? So he was able to interact with that guy in a way that he was able to, in a sense, stand up for the woman, simultaneously still being supportive of the guy, right? And so that's the human kind of touch and the human kinds of relationships that we need to be having. So my hat's off to Stevie Ray. And so what's on my card?
Yeah.
So my card is to remember what to do about these difficult conversations. So we're going to engage in a number of different conversations and difficult conversations this Thanksgiving season. And so what I need to remember is that there are 3 levels of communication that will be happening simultaneously, and that the person I'm communicating with may be communicating from a different position than what I am.
Well, that's what I'm expecting.
Yep. So here are the 3 that I'm going to try to pay attention to. Is that in our conversation, there is the level of what. So what it is that we're talking about. So that's the facts, that's the statistics, that's the ideas, that's the situation, the what. Then I also have to remember that the next level under that is this idea of the emotion. So what do people feel about that what? And then the third is the identity that's attached to the person that I'm dealing with, or the relationship that we have, right?
The identity that you've attached to that person,
or that person has attached to me, right? So for example, and I'll use my mother as a prime example. So my mother believes that the world's situations are all the gays' fault. The gays. Now, and it's so interesting because she didn't raise me like that, right? But now she's at a point in her older age where she's like, it's all the gays' fault. The economic crisis is the gays' fault, blah, blah, blah. Now, we can talk about the what, and I can challenge her on that and make her cry. So she'll go right to the emotion, and that's when she hijacks stuff, right? So she goes to crying, and I'm done. Like, I'm like, okay, Mom, whatever, right? But I also know that this is my mother, so I have to keep my relationship with her, or I want to keep my relationship with her. So as we're having conversations, I have to keep in mind, what level are we communicating on? Are we talking about the what? Or are we actually talking about the emotion? Or are we actually talking about, or is our identity or our relationship in jeopardy as we talk about this? And so it very much like when someone asks, well, how do I look in these jeans? What does this dress look like? You have to be very careful how you answer that, because they could be talking about something different than what you think they're talking about. And so knowing that what and those emotions and that identity are all kind of wrapped in these conversations, ask yourself when you're engaged with folks, what level am I talking on? What are we really talking about here? And you don't have to ask that to the person, but be critical in your own thinking. about what are we really discussing. Are we talking about feelings, emotions, or what emotions and identity?
Yeah, well,
Is that going to be
that
helpful?
sounds no, not for me because I'm probably going to stick with just avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah, with certain people,
Yeah.
I'm not going to purposely get into a conversation that I'm not.
Okay. But here's going to be the funny thing, right? Because you're not going to do it, but I would imagine that they feel justified now in bringing up stuff that before they would only wait for you to bring up. So how are you going to deal with that?
Well, calmly.
Love it, love it, love it. Yeah.
I mean, really.
So one of the things, another thing to kind of think about.
Well, and to add, go ahead.
No. Bring it.
Well, I have this. I'm feeling is it narcissistic or arrogant in that. So this election has me confused, as like makes me think like I was wrong about the world, and and that I'm more in tune with what it means to be nice to people and treat everybody with respect, and that people who aren't feeling that are less evolved, and that has me feeling like arrogant, and that I'm better than them.
Yeah.
And it's just this like loop that goes around.
No. So here,
then I'll add, and then if I'm feeling like that, if you tell me something and I'm just like, I might just think, well, you're just ignorant, and I'm just gonna be calm and let that little conversation end because there's nothing to gain there.
Yeah. Okay. But that's the same thinking that got us to where we are today.
Right.
Everything.
But I'll get through a meal that way.
Yeah, but it's not a meal. It's an opportunity to change. So it's so funny. I see it on Facebook. Everything that liberals were saying about conservatives are now saying about liberals. Like it just totally flipped. Somebody called me on Facebook racist.
No.
They said, why are you being so racist and so divisive? I was like, what are you talking about? Right. So I have a friend, and her whole life is around community, conflict resolution. Like she exudes, like you touch her and your conflict is resolved. Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking, and she said, I lost it. I totally lost it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what? She said, somebody cut me off, and they had all these political stickers on their thing, and I had road rage.
Yep.
I followed them, and I honked my horn at them.
Yep.
She's like, I'm a peaceful person.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, we don't know what we are until we are come directly up against something that tests who we are. And so,
well, yeah, and until, for me, what I'm feeling is that my values are being threatened.
Yeah.
Right. And
your values, you feel like your values are being threatened, but I want you to refocus, right? So to take just a step back out of our narcissism, and it's natural for us to be narcissistic, right? So there's a certain part of us that needs to do that. But I want you to hear, and this is what I was talking about earlier in the program, that in the metro area, we've not been listening to rural folks because we've been talking about changing demographics. And changing demographics sounds good. It sounds progressive, right? But what's the flip side of that? So if a minority group is going to grow and become more influential, what does that mean for the people who are already here? Wait a minute.
well, then
My group is going to get smaller and less influential. The feelings that you are feeling right now, I can only imagine that folks who saw the election of Barack Obama and all of this progressive idealism were feeling the very same way. That the way they saw the world wasn't what the world was like. And so going back to what we talked about.
But that's what I want. I want them to think that it's not. Okay, so when I'm feeling like somebody is very in tune with hate and disrespect,
Yep.
and I want them to wake up to a different way. Why should they get to promote that?
Yep. And what I will suggest is that it is through relationship that this is not an academic thing, right? So as much as I think this is where, a so-called liberals have really lost it, because academically folks are saying, well, here's the concrete answer. The demographics are here, the numbers are here. But what they haven't done is built relationships with people to hear other people's hearts. Right. So these, and I'm not defending neo-Nazis, because I know that they won't ever defend me. And this is so funny. The Ku Klux Klan will never endorse me, ever. Mm-hmm. They will never endorse me. So people that they have endorsed or are withdrawing themselves from the Ku Klux Klan need to ask themselves why these people would claim them in the first place. But that's a whole nother conversation, right? But what we haven't done is had real conversations and really tried to understand the other person's point of view, not because it needs to make sense to us, but because the relationship of having the conversation. I saw this on Facebook the other day, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but it said, listening is the closest thing to love that most of us will ever get. And we don't spend enough time listening to people who we think are different, even when we know that we're right. With my 2-year-old daughter, I have to listen to what she wants, even though it's all some fictitious characters and all this other stuff.
Often doesn't make sense.
It oftentimes doesn't make sense. It's very random. It seems random until I sit down and listen to her, and I'm like, oh, you want so and so and so. But if I just listen to the words, or I'm passing by and I don't take time to do it, I don't make sense of it. So here's another example. So at church, sometimes we have autistic kids, and our church is not necessarily sensory friendly, very overly stimulated, and so. For whatever reason, I find myself working with some of those kids through service, right? And this idea of attachment for kids on the autism spectrum is different. So they make attachments, but they're different. So typically, kids without autism run to their parents for safety and cling to them and hold them and look them in the eye and make those connections. Kids with autism do it, but they do it differently than so-called normal kids. But if you're not paying attention to how they do it, it'll seem like they're not doing it. And so the same thing, I would say that the same rationale applies when we try to work with people who we think are ideologically different from us. And I would suggest that if we keep looking at those differences and for those differences, that's all we will see. The people who seem to be opposite than us oftentimes want the exact same things, but their methods are so different and oftentimes foreign to us because I don't understand. I just don't understand. But I will never understand until I build a relationship. And so this Thanksgiving season it is going to really, if we're going to see any kind of progress, even in what a lot of folks would think are some of our darkest days, it's going to happen in our relationships. In a relationship building, even with people who hate us, who hate us. That's the only way that our relationships with them is the only way that we can get past this stuff.
So it sounds like it makes sense, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. I'm not seeing it. I'm just hearing of people just cutting other people off.
Yep.
And I'm doing it.
Yep.
I'm so-and-so's, thinking about the world opposite from me, and there's no, my time is better spent with maybe somebody else who maybe I can help take some action in a movement or something. Like,
yep, and I hear you.
Like, cut my losses.
And I'm just saying that's exactly the thinking on the other side of things that has gotten us right to where we are today.
Yeah.
I can't talk to those people. I don't have anything in common with those people. I can't blah, blah, blah. They don't understand, blah, 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 blah. All this stuff. And until we get to a point where we can pierce that stuff and actually hear this stuff, we're not going to make the kind of progress we want to make.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. And I'm not saying that this stuff, and it seems really Pollyanna. I'm just saying it's not easy. I don't always want to get up and brush my teeth, but I do want to brush my teeth, right? I don't always want to get up to work. I don't want to fill out my timesheet at work. Blah, blah. There's lots of stuff that I don't want to do that I do because I have to do it to see the kind of changes in my life that I want to see. And I'm thinking these Turkey Confidential conversations are going to be extremely important.
Yeah, and it's going to carry over to the rest of the holidays.
Yes, it is. This is
It's not just a Thanksgiving.
Beginning. It's not just Thanksgiving. So, I know this has been a draining conversation.
Yeah, I'm seriously, I am drained. I'm mentally exhausted right now.
And we are in some tough, draining
And
times.
I reached this point before we started recording. But
Yep.
So,
but I think this is going to be good for our listeners because many of them are in the same kind of spot.
Yeah, they are.
And we gotta push through it. We gotta push through it. We have to be vocal. We have to be actionable. We have to be involved. We have to be engaged. Otherwise, we shrink.
Yeah, because I'm feeling myself tuning out, and I know that's also feeling unproductive and ineffective.
And might I say, it might be a place of privilege.
Well, sure.
Because
right.
I
can tune out.
I can't tune out.
Right.
I can't check out. Like, I'm black. People keep bringing it to me, even when I don't want to be black. Right? Even when I try to be human.
Sure.
They bring blackness to me. So,
yeah. Should we call it an end here?
Let's call it an end. This is Andre Koen.
This is Brian Jost. Thanks everybody for listening. Check out the website, armchairactivistpodcast.com. We'll join you next time.
We're out of here.
Do you make the decisions for this world? If you do, will you tell your boys and girls? Now who